Welcome to Week 2 presentation, Part 2 for GA325 corporate campaigns. The optimal paragraph. Adjustments to text, lettering, kerning, font size, word spacing, and tracking tends to be based on relative height of lowercase letters, weight, and the height of descenders and ascenders. When setting up a paragraph, another variable to consider is the amount of hyphenated words. Too much hyphenation interrupts the reading process. So the best visual paragraph takes all these variables mentioned over the last 3 slides and puts them together in a harmonic balance. Not necessarily an easy task for the designer, especially when the project's body copy takes up a large amount of space on a page. This may happen on an annual report, which requires a year's worth of data to be displayed, not so much on a textbook or on a magazine. After considering all these elements, the artist will choose a standard font size and spacing for the entire publication's running text. That helps keep everything consistent from page to page and have just more of a unified type of look. So once there is a standard page size, text grouping, and size of other elements are impacted, then they're able to kind of move on. So to create optimal paragraph, we adjust the type size, distance between the words and lines, and paragraph width. The goal is to combine these adjustments to provide overall a pleasing spaces between words and easily comprehend sentences. The lowest degree of hyphenation and end up with a close to even rag alignment. Sounds easy enough, right? However, you have to consider other things that you're putting into this that kind of make it a little bit more challenging. For instance, a call out, which is a paragraph of running text set apart from the main body of copy to help emphasize usually quotations. As you could kind of see there, you have to kind of disrupt that column of body copy and try to, fit that call out in there without having too much rags or changing, just trying to keep everything aligned properly. Often publications group paragraphs vertically into columns, normally 1 to 3 per page. Because the paragraphs in a column run into each other, it is necessary to give the audience instant cues as to where a paragraph ends and a new one begins. This can be done using subheads between paragraphs. Subheads are often in a bold in order to distinguish them from the paragraph that they define. You may have wondered, why do we indent the first line of a paragraph? Well, one reason is that it is another common way to distinguish the beginning of a new paragraph. The artist adjusts the amount of first line indentation depending on the visual impact. Too little indent may not be recognizable as a new paragraph, and maybe too much could make the first line look out of alignment with the rest of the paragraphs. Hanging indent looks like this. Having a paragraph's first line hanging out to the left of the rest of the paragraph, appearing out of alignment, is also known as a hanging indent. Although this quickly distinguishes new paragraphs, it may cause the first line to crowd too close to the end of the end of the column to the left and end up being a major type of distraction. So this is an alternative way to distinguish between paragraphs. Seems like the opposite. A hanging indent is kind of like the opposite of a regular old indent. Paragraph spacing. Yet another way paragraphs can be differentiated is for the designer to add more leading between the last line of a paragraph and the first line of the next paragraph. in order to determine how much additional leading to add between paragraphs, the 1.5 rule can be applied. You take the paragraph's leading size, which is usually 2 points more than the font size. So it's usually, if it's a 12-point font size, then you're looking at the leading being 14, and multiply it by 1.5 to determine the extra amount of space. So take the leading size of 12 points, multiply it by 1.5, and you got 18. If that leading size is 14, you're looking at about a 20. So use this amount of space between paragraphs, and it will be enough to identify the new paragraph without leaving too big of a gap. Subheadlines can serve two functions. The first is to differentiate between paragraphs, as we have already stated, and the second is to serve as a quick summary or definition of a paragraph. This can also give the readers the basic theme of a group of paragraphs or portion of an article. So as you can kind of see in this example below, it says the quick red fox is bolded. It's in the same size font. The only difference is it is bolded, and that kind of helps make it stick out and give us a little bit of information about what that paragraph is going to be about. So that's one way of doing it. Sometimes they just increase the size a little bit, using different tactics to try to get it to stand out. And of course, use these consistently. So if you choose to just bold the subhead, we'll do that for every paragraph. Don't make them different for each one, because then it can be confusing to the viewer. Guidelines to typographic detail. The finer aspects of typography also need to be addressed and can be just as important as paragraph attributes to guarantee a smooth reading. These are basic rules to follow when dealing with punctuation, symbols, headlines, subheads, and special features such as callouts. Issues with the spacing, readability, and emphasis also need to be considered when working with these text details. So add a little space before question and exclamation marks below a half word space. Also, you can subtract space after quotation marks and before commas. Hyphens and dashes. Let's back up for a second and make sure that we are speaking the same typographic language. What is a hyphen and how is it adjusted? What exactly is an N and an M dash? Hyphens break long words into sections and send the later section of the word to the beginning of the next line, so that when a long word occurs at the end of the sentence, it doesn't stick way out on the right side of the paragraph and then create just more contrast in the rags. You want to minimize the rags, so that's why dashes can really help. Too many hyphens can ruin a paragraph. How can we fix this? Multi-page print programs such as InDesign and Quark Express have hyphenation and justification adjustment settings that are all built into them, and they can help kind of streamline that. An N dash is shorter than the M dash and is used for ranges of numbers, like between a telephone number or so. The M dash usually separates descriptive phrases within running text. This concludes the second part of the Week 2 presentation.